I am bursting at the seams. I can't wait to tell you about this speaker, the Eminent Technology LFT-8C. Now here's the thing. In early June of this year, I reviewed a very similar speaker, the LFT-8B. And I kind of knew about the C, but for whatever reason, I put it off. And I'm so glad I'm doing this follow-up now. I mean, the two speakers, the B and the C, when you look at them head on, they look like twins. They look like the same thing. But you look at the back, and you'll see they're not the same. And the difference is in the woofer. Now, the 8B, the original model there, has an 8-inch direct radiating woofer in a sealed box. And in the 8C, it's very different. It's a dipole woofer. It has basically that cabinet has two woofers, a forward-firing 8-inch woofer and a rear-firing 6.5-inch woofer. And that woofer, that dipole woofer, is active. There's electronics in there that also feature DSP to fine-tune the balance between the woofer and the planar magnetic mid-range driver and the tweeter. The new one is a substantial upgrade in terms of purity and transparency and just the way the woofer and panel work so much better together now. It's more coherent, so seamless, and the bass detail and clarity is absolutely extraordinary. There's a link, I'm going to provide a link to the review of the original, the 8B that I did here. But I'm going to give you just some of the basics and mention that Eminent Technology is a US company. They design and build their speakers in Tallahassee, Florida. They do sell direct in the US, though they do have a handful of brick and mortar dealers, and they sell direct. They have no distribution in Europe or the UK, but they sell direct to the UK and also to most of Europe, as they put it. That's really interesting. Now, as for the sound of this speaker, now I loved the 8B. It was just phenomenal. Please watch that video. But this one, the 8C, takes it to the next level, and it's not just the bass. The whole speaker feels more coherent. In the 8B, the woofer blend with the panel was okay, it was good, but now it's perfect. It sounds like a full range, well, actually kind of like a full range electrostatic speaker, but one that has bass response down to up to 50 to 40 hertz or so. That's pretty good. But the bass quality is so fast and clear, like you can hear the transition from the dipole woofer to the dipole planar magnetic driver. It's just so beautiful and so seamless. And another advantage of going active on the woofer is that it has a volume control. Yes, it does. So you can turn the level of the woofer up or down relative to the panel, and you can't do that on the passive version. So I always felt that the passive woofer in the 8B was a little too much. It was like 2 or 3 dB too hot. And here you can tune it to your heart's content. Let's take a look at the connectivity of the LFT-8C. Now, one thing you can figure out right away is that those binding posts, what they're for, they are the input for the panel, for the mid-range and tweeter to your amplifier. That's straightforward. Now, these balance and RCA inputs and outputs are for connections to your electronics, from your preamplifier into a power amplifier. I'm not going to get into the detail here. It's very hard to explain it. It's not that complicated, but I'm just going to lose too many of you if I explain that. But I will say that the DSP, the sound of using this speaker with DSP, it really wasn't my cup of tea. The advantage of using DSP mostly is that it can play louder with ease, and without the DSP, which is mostly the way I heard it, it will distort if you push it too loud. And the distortion is obvious, it's not subtle. But for me, I could play it within its range very comfortably in this very large room, or pretty large room, and not feel like I was frustrated it didn't play loud enough. It played loud enough for me. And here's a picture of the menu tree, and I will link in my description to the designer, Bruce Thigpen's, his email address, and you can address all your technical questions about this speaker to him, because I won't be of much help. Oh, as for something that I can be helpful with, yes, there will be an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day later on in the show. Oh, there's one other thing that is important that I have to talk about a little bit, is that this is a dipole speaker, which means there's just as much sound coming out of the back of it as the front, but it has minimal radiation to the sides, meaning there's less reflections off of your side walls. So in terms of acoustic treatment and all that, it's an easier speaker to place in that way, that you don't have to worry so much about the side reflections. It also is less likely to bounce the sound from the panels, less likely to bounce off your ceiling because it's firing straight ahead. And those are all big pluses. Now, you do have to give this speaker, like any good speaker, room to breathe. It needs to be, I would say, 3 feet away from the wall behind it. Now, I'm sure some people will get away with 2 feet, but I think 3 feet is a really good starting place. It's true for most, if not, most speakers that I review sound better away from walls than near walls. And that's just the way it is. So anyway, that's an important thing to consider. And also, this speaker's sensitivity is on the low side. I believe it's 87 dB. So you got to give it some power. Not crazy, depending on how loud you want to play. I used 2 power amps over the course of this review. The Pass XA25, which was a great match, and also the linear tube, the LTA40, which is actually rated at 50 watts a channel for 4 ohms or 8 ohms. So yes, I did listen to the speaker with DSP in the most straightforward setup approach. I think most people would prefer the sound with no DSP, but if you're into loud or dynamics or home theater, you would probably want to use the DSP. So the price of the LFT-8C is $4,500 a pair, and that includes free shipping in the US, but not to Europe. And owners of the older model LFT speakers, LFT-8 speakers, can buy this woofer and swap it out with the woofer they already have, and basically hear what I just heard. And the price of those woofers, the dipole active woofers, is $1,600 a pair, free shipping in the US, but unfortunately not for Europe and the UK. One of the first recordings I played was Bowie's Heroes, specifically that track, because it's so dense, it's so deep, there's so much happening with percussion and drums and guitars and keyboards and reverb, all this competing for your attention at the same time. And the transparency of the 8C was just staggering. The high frequencies were so pure and clear and extended. I mean, they are on the 8B as well, but just that with the active woofer engaged, it just made this seamless presentation. And because these speakers are so tall, it really was a wall of sound stretching across my room, extending way beyond the sides of the speakers, forward of the speakers, behind the speakers, very three-dimensional. No box speaker, certainly no stand-mount speaker could get close to what I was hearing from these speakers. Just absolutely extraordinary. I couldn't actually do an A-B back and forth comparison between the LFT-8B and the 8C, because I converted, with the help of my friend Mark, the 8B into an 8C, which means swapping out the woofers and sort of learning how to set up the active woofer. And that took about an hour and a half or 2 hours to do, to swap out the 2 woofers. And the recording that I used before and after was Frank Sinatra's Only the Lonely, which is incredible. I mean, Sinatra is at his peak, his phrasing, his dynamics, his presence on the mic, and then there's the Nelson Riddle Orchestra spread out behind him. And you feel like you're in the studio, you hear the air. And going from B to C, that was one of the things that really struck me, is the high frequency clarity and purity, which is phenomenal on the 8B. Same tweeter, but it's the coherence from top to bottom that somehow changed my perception of the sound of the mid-range and treble. It just does. I can't explain. It's not logical, but it just did. So like I said earlier, the 8C sounds like a perfect, to me, electrostatic speaker. I'm not a fan of electrostatic speakers. This one is more dynamic than any electrostatic I've ever heard. And I lived with quads for a really long time. Quad 63s. This is at a completely different level. And that purity and clarity is just intoxicating. I'm listening to the Beatles' Rubber Soul, and the thing that really struck me, it was just hearing John, Paul, and George's vocals, just them on the mic, hearing them more clearly, with more immediacy than I'm used to. And Ringo's drums, how he's doing it, the phrasing, all of that was so well played by the LFT-8C. It's like a microscope for recordings, but it doesn't seem to somehow, the magical part is, it doesn't make crappy recordings sound unlistenable. They're still crappy, but they're tolerable. So somehow that's a magic trick that Bruce pulled off with this speaker, that it's a very high resolution speaker, but it's not one that hurts your ears when you play less than wonderful recordings. Now, I do have to mention, by the way, that like the LFT-8B, the LFT-8C isn't the best speaker for very quiet, late night listening. It's okay, not bad, but you do feel like you want to turn it up to sort of medium-ish loud, and that's where it really comes alive. That's true for most low sensitivity speakers, which this one is, but high sensitivity speakers like horn speakers and zoo speakers, they play quiet better than this speaker does. One thing I didn't notice so much with the LFT-8B is that even though it's a very directional speaker, when I was way off axis, when I was 5 or 10 feet away from the speakers to the side, it actually sounded, like that feeling like, wow, there's people over there playing music. It does that because of the way it fills the room, because of its dipole radiation. It fills the room in a way that's closer to the sound of real instruments. So when you're off axis, it still sounds really good. But when you're sitting in the sweet spot, the imaging just locks in. And it's big, and it's wide, and it has depth. And because it's tall, it has this, life-size sound to it, which I find hugely appealing. Another recording that I played that I know very, very well is Miles Davis On the Corner, the complete On the Corner, the sessions, which is like 6 CDs. And it's remarkable the way Miles Davis's trumpet just like cuts through. There's a lot of percussion, electric guitars, there's a lot of stuff going on in this mix. But this speaker just separates individual instruments so well. And if you stood close to someone playing a live trumpet, even if they weren't Miles Davis, you have that sense of the sound like piercing the atmosphere, just like jumping out, right? And I was getting a good portion of that over these speakers. For a complete contrast to that, I don't usually talk about classical music, but I found this on Qobuz. This is Joel Versavold. I think that's how you say his name. He's a saxophone player, and he does the Bach cello suites on saxophone, solo saxophone. And it's just, he is so there. The tone, the breath, the sound of this saxophone is really, really special. And because it's a solo instrument recording, all the little shifts and dynamics and everything, just beautiful. But these arrangements of the Bach cello suites for saxophone are just so beautiful. Really just a stunning recording. I highly recommend this. As I was finishing up, I did compare the LFT-8C with the Pure Audio Project Duet 15s. Now these Duet 15s have been modified. They have an upgraded mid-range and an improved crossover network. So they're better than they've been, more transparent, more alive, more stuff going on. And that speaker has a 15-inch open baffle woofer. And comparing these two speakers, the Eminent Technology and the Pure Audio Project, well, the Pure Audio Project is a much larger, fuller, balanced sound. It just has an ease to it and plays quietly really, really well, much better than the Eminent Technology. So as much as I love what the Eminent Technology is doing, the Pure Audio Project just has a soul to it that I'm not getting from the LFT-8C. Now, I have to say that this speaker, the Pure Audio Project, is about double the price of the Eminent Technology. As for the bass, well, the bass speed, definition, agility, clarity is extraordinary. Really, really good. You hear into bass instruments, the tactile parts, the feeling of an instrument moving air in your room. It does that exceedingly well. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't sound like there's a subwoofer in the system. An 8-inch driver with help from a 6.5-inch in the rear is not going to really sound like a 15-inch or even a 12-inch powered subwoofer. So if that's what you need, you'd have to add that to the LFT-8C, adding a separate sub. So Steve, what do you really think? Segment of this review. This is an incredible speaker for the money. A US-made speaker of extreme transparency, phenomenal imaging, amazing bass speed and dexterity, as I just said. It's just a very enjoyable speaker to listen to. If that's what you are craving, maximum res, clarity, detail, all that stuff, and a very open, closer to life-size soundstage. Phenomenal. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this enough. I guess I did. But the mid-range of this speaker is just so right, so clear, so low in distortion that when you go back to listening to dynamic speakers with, tweeters and woofers arrayed across the front panel, they sound kind of sloppy and loose and muddled by comparison to what you can get out of the LFT-8C. Anyway, I think it's an incredible product. Definitely going to be heading towards Speaker of the Year as one of the Speakers of the Year for 2023. How could it not? It's made such an impression on me. So now we're going to do it. We're going to do the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. This is Tony's system. He has a Prima Luna Evo 300 integrated amp with the integrated phono stage. The speakers are Klipsch Palladium P37F, turntable Rigaplaner 3 with the exact cartridge. Then there's a Marantz CD 6007. The cassette deck is a Nakamichi LX3 two-head cassette deck from 1983, and it's been fully restored and working very well. And to finish off, the DAC streamer is a Liederman Limetree Network 2 streaming Qobuz. Thank you, Tony. All right, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg. It's true, I am the Audiophiliac, and I have to once again remind people that there is an Audiophiliac scammer out there trying to screw people over, manufacturers and also my viewers, and saying to my viewers saying, as the fake Steve Guttenberg saying, I want to give you a free product, something I reviewed. All you have to do is send me, the fake scammer, bad guy, mischief maker, money to cover the shipping. Don't fall for that. It's not real. I don't do that. The only time I ask for money, as you well know, is for you to consider joining my Patreon. To do so is super easy to do. The address is on the screen. At the top levels, you and I will have a conversation every month at the beginning of the month. And I so enjoy those conversations. But any level of support that you'd like to contribute is much appreciated. Thank you so much. And if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you have yet to subscribe, please do. And with that, I can say my work here is at last complete. Thank you so much for watching. And I really, really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. I was going to say real soon. Very, very soon.